We've mostly read stories about weak losers and runts who die and get reincarnated, only to become overpowered powerhouses later on. But this story is about a king who had plenty of achievements under his belt before he died. The reason behind his death remains a mystery. But after his death, he opens his eyes as a baby, and contrary to the lavish room fit for a king that he'd expect, he wakes up in a humble home. His mother's name is Alice, a kind-hearted woman, and his father is Reynolds, a dependable and charismatic man, if you can overlook his occasional childishness. The era the king is reborn into is much more archaic. After observing his surroundings for weeks, the king finally comes to the conclusion that he's learned everything this world has to offer. But that's when he finds out he's wrong. Later, he discovers that this world has magic when his mother uses healing magic to treat a wound inflicted by his father's mischief. It's then that the king realizes there's so much more to this world than he ever imagined. And if he has to be brutally honest, he actually knows nothing about it. Time passes, and once the king is able to crawl, he often sneaks out of his crib to read books and expand his knowledge about this world. Ever since he discovered this place, he's been sneaking out every night to learn more about it. He's found that the world he's been born into is made up of 3 major kingdoms: Elenoir, the elven kingdom deep in the forest; Darv, the vast underground kingdom and home of the dwarves; and Sapin, the human kingdom, which is also the most populated region. Both this world and his previous one share a monarchy system, but rulership here is passed down, not earned, which basically means that this world is vastly underdeveloped compared to his old one. He realizes the reason for the lack of technological advancement is the presence of magic in this world. He's been studying the fundamentals of magic ever since. In his old world, there was a life force called Ki, which practitioners used to strengthen their bodies and weapons through rigorous training. But this world has a similar force called mana. However, unlike Ki, which exists only inside a person, mana is present all around them. The power to control mana is largely genetic. Roughly 1 in 100 children possesses it, and it can be used in various ways. The 2 most common methods are augmenting and conjuring. Augmenters enhance their bodies with mana, allowing them to possess incredible strength, defense, and agility. However, their weakness lies in their limited range. On the other hand, conjurers emit mana into the outside world, bending their surroundings to their will. But to cast a spell, they must supplement their own mana core with mana from the environment. Interestingly, his mother is what they call a deviant, more specifically, an emitter. Deviants are rare types of mages with unique abilities, and emitters, like his mother, specialize in restorative mana. According to the book he read, a mage's first awakening happens between early adolescence and the late teenage years, when their mana core manifests. The concept of a mana core sounded uncannily similar to the Kai Center from his previous life. In his old world, children were taught to meditate and sense the fragments of Kai scattered inside their bodies, gathering them into a single place to form a Ki Center. But when our little king decides to try this technique himself, to his surprise, he nails it on his first attempt. Though his mother interrupts him before he can do anything significant, time rolls on and 2 years fly by. Yet Alice feels like she hasn't fully figured out her little boy. She's learning about him slowly, piece by piece. She's named him Arthur, and he's the most precious and adorable thing in her life. One day she notices her husband teaching their little one how to swing a stick and fight, which sets her temper flaring because their baby can barely crawl. Alice loves documenting everything, keeping a daily diary, and moments like these never fail to put a smile on her face. She's also noticed that Arthur absolutely loves visiting the small merchant strip in central Ashbur. So, instead of shopping for groceries once or twice a week, she's taken to going downtown every other day. Of course, she tells herself she's not spoiling him by doing this. It's all for educational purposes since Arthur loves learning and seeing new things. And the fresh food she can bring home daily is just a bonus. Watching Arthur grow up so quickly, she sometimes wonders what he'll be like when he's older. With Ray as his father, she's sure he'll have an interest in becoming an adventurer, but she can't help worrying. She only hopes he fares better than the naive young teens dreaming of making it big as adventurers. Now, if only she could do something about his perpetual habit of sneaking into the study. It's even tempted her to move his crib into the study room, though that's a decision for another day. So far, this is the overview of what Alice has learned about her son over the past 2 years. One day, as Arthur peers through the window, he spots his father preparing to perform some magic. Reynolds closes his eyes in order to concentrate. The intensity of his concentration leaves Arthur brimming with curiosity, eager to see what kind of magic his father will perform. Suddenly, the pebbles on the ground began to lift. As his father reaches the peak of his enchantment, the debris floats only a few meters into the sky. Arthur is left utterly disappointed seeing this. While Reynolds looks quite pleased with his achievement, Arthur feels equally unimpressed. Watching his father take 3 minutes of utmost focus just to lift some pebbles a few feet is just ridiculous. He can't help but think doing it physically would have been easier. Just then, Alice joins him by the window. When she glances outside, her expression shifts to mild annoyance as she notices her husband has ruined the front yard again. So far, Arthur has learned that his father is an augmenter, which only deepens his curiosity about himself. He wonders what will he be when he awakens his mana core. After watching his father practice for a while, Arthur decides to retreat. As he tries to climb off the bench, he stumbles and struggles to get down. His eyes are half closed from focusing too hard, but Alice misinterprets this, thinking he's getting sleepy. She scoops him up, deciding it's time for his nap. But the poor boy quickly claps his tiny hands together and earnestly requests his mother to let him study instead. The innocence radiating from him is overwhelming, leaving Alice with no choice but to give in to his request. Arthur sits down with a book larger than himself spread open in front of him. Suddenly, a crashing noise echoes outside. Alice fears her clumsy husband might have knocked down yet another tree. She hurries out to investigate, leaving Arthur with a golden opportunity to practice his mana core formation. You see, aside from accumulating knowledge about this world, Arthur's greatest accomplishment so far has been his progress in forming his mana core. Over the past 2 years, he's painstakingly moved tens of thousands of tiny fragments of mana within his body, gathering them near his solar plexus. Arthur understands why it typically takes until adolescence for a mana core to form naturally. The fragments move agonizingly slowly toward the center, making it an arduous task for both the body and mind. But our boy's relentless efforts haven't gone to waste. He's almost there, just one last piece remains. As soon as he places that final fragment, an explosion erupts inside the house, obliterating the entire structure in one powerful blast. Outside, Reynolds instinctively shields Alice, wrapping her in his arms to protect her from the searing heat and debris. When the dust finally settles, the devastated couple turns to find their home in ruins. Alice is beside herself with shock and grief as they rush toward the wreckage to check on their son. Reynolds frantically pushes aside debris, but when he notices his son, his worry quickly turns to shock and then to amazement. There, amidst the destruction, their son floats casually in the air as if nothing had happened. Arthur looks completely unfazed, his tiny body surrounded by a faint glow of mana. After forming his mana core, the little one finally drops down onto his feet, and he can finally feel the presence of the mana core inside him. He's already starting to enjoy the sensation of having a mana core inside, and even the trees around him seem greener. But then, he realizes his house has been destroyed, and he has no idea who or what caused the damage. 5 years pass since that accident. Along with his mother teaching him how to read and write, Arthur has also been learning the basics of mana manipulation and augmentation. At first, since his body was too small for sparring, they focused on basic body workouts. Not long ago, his father decided it was finally time for Arthur to practice with the wooden sword he'd received for his 3rd birthday. Reynolds takes him outside to train, and as Arthur stands there with his newly acquired wooden sword, his father holds up a tree branch and tells him to match the flow of mana with his breathing. Just like your heart or lungs, your mana core is just another organ, his father explains. But Arthur doesn't think these abstract and vague instructions are going to teach anything to someone who is just literally 4 years old. Arthur takes his stance and exchanges a few playful blows with his father. The sparring drags on, with Reynolds clearly enjoying himself, but Arthur grows increasingly frustrated. Our boy knows that his father would not let him go until he accomplishes something noteworthy. With no other choice, he gathers his courage and swings his wooden sword hard enough to break the stick his father is holding. After this significant move, he immediately expresses his desire to return to his studies. Once our boy gets back to his studies about magic, we learn that in this world, strength is measured by the color of a person's mana core. Mana cores start off black, tainted by impurities like blood and other particles within the body. Over time, as these impurities are filtered out, the core's color changes, becoming purer and more powerful. The progression moves from black to red, orange, yellow, silver, and finally, white. Each stage is divided into 3 shades: dark, solid, and light, with lighter shades signifying greater purity and strength. As our boy was deep in concentration, his mother interrupts him by urging him to come in for dinner. As they sit around eating, Arthur feels a growing irritation at the constant interruptions to his studies. Reynolds begins talking about finding a proper mentor for Arthur to further develop his skills. Alice immediately objects, pointing out that Arthur is only 4 years old and far too young for such a step. Reynolds counters that their son shows remarkable potential in mana manipulation, even at his young age, and he doesn't want to hold him back. Alice, however, stands her ground. She insists that she will not send her child off to some distant city. Reynolds reassures her by explaining that it isn't just any city, and promises that his trusted friend will personally take care of Arthur. Arthur tunes out most of the conversation, finding his parents' back and forth exhausting. They suddenly turn to him and want his opinion on the matter. His father asks if he has any interest in leaving for the big city to study under a real teacher. My guy can't help but feel unsettled that his father is literally asking the opinion of someone who's only 4 years old. Anyhow, he plays the part of being a kid and meekly asks if his parents can't just go with him together. A sudden silence falls over everyone, but soon they burst into chuckles. Turns out this gullible couple hadn't even thought about the possibility of going with their kid as well. With that settled, his father makes the final call that they're all heading to Xyrus City together. The day finally arrives for them to leave their home. And they're not traveling alone. A party of adventurers will be tagging along with them on the journey. His father greets one of the adventurers and introduces his son to them. The little one quickly bows his head in respect and expresses his gratitude for their help in accompanying them to Xyrus. This adventurer really likes the kid's mannerisms and is already fond of him. His name is Crench, an augmenter, and his specialty is the spear. Then there's Angela Rose, a conjurer with a focus on wind magic. She's got big hooters and stands out among the group. Next up is Durden Walker, also a conjurer, but his specialty is earth magic. There's also Jasmine Flameworth, an augmenter who specializes in dual daggers. Among all the adventurers, she's the most passive. Without saying much, she quietly walks towards the carriage they're about to ride in. Lastly, there's Helen Shard, another augmenter with a specialty in magic archery. Now that everyone's acquainted, Reynolds decides it's time to move on. They load the carriages with their things, and the journey begins. The time has finally come for Arthur to explore a world beyond the little village he knew. As their journey continues, dawn breaks, and so do the monsters. The adventurers quickly take care of them, and they set up camp deep in the forest to spend the night. As everyone enjoys the bonfire, Arthur seems a little dejected, feeling the weight of this mundane journey. Helen Shard then turns to our boy and sits beside him to catch up. She's quite curious to learn more about him after hearing his father constantly praise him as a great magician throughout the journey. Meanwhile, Crench notices the two talking and decides he's going to test Reynolds' son for himself. Without much warning, he grabs the little one off the ground and proposes a quick duel. When Arthur finds himself facing off against Crench, he is unsure if he's even supposed to fight an adventurer like this. His pleading eyes dart toward his father, hoping for a way out. But his father only grins and starts egging him to win. Feeling utterly hopeless, Arthur can't believe how his father is literally useless in moments like these. Anyhow, my guy takes his stance, tapping into the experiences of his previous life. With a firm grip on his sword, he launches himself at Crench. Crench, on the other hand, stays steady, ready to dodge the incoming attack. But little does he know, our boy vanishes right before his eyes and reappears directly behind this bastard's back. My guy steadies his tiny body and channels some magic into his sword. Without wasting a moment, he quickly swings at Crench. But Crench dodges the attack with ease and retaliates with a slash of his own. The little guy ducks just in time, letting the stick zip past over his head. He takes advantage of the brief opening, launching himself straight into Crench's ribs and knocking the big guy to the ground. Crench isn't one to go down easily, though. He quickly swings his leg to trip the kid up, but my guy ducks down once again, narrowly avoiding it. Although he dodged the first onslaught, he's not sure if he can handle the next move Crench is already preparing. Sure enough, as soon as Crench's stick connects with him, the impact sends our boy flying. He lands a few feet away, his back aching like hell. Durden Walker gives Crench a little slap on the neck for going overboard with a kid. Crench, on the other hand, is absolutely awestruck by the sheer display of skill he just witnessed in Arthur. He can't understand how his father claims he hasn't taught him anything. But as usual, the father insists he hasn't taught his son a thing. The doting mother quickly starts healing Arthur while scolding him because she does not like the idea that he had been studying fighting all this time. Arthur tries to brush it off, claiming he just picked up a few moves by watching his father and reading books. But Crench isn't convinced. He's sure those moves couldn't have been learned just from books, and he's eager to learn the techniques Arthur just pulled off. Eventually, Arthur explains how to perform the acrobatic moves he pulled off. But whenever the others try, they fail miserably. Several days pass since they began their journey to Xyrus City. During this time, Arthur's birthday also passed, and he received gifts, not only because it was his birthday, but also for the efforts he put into teaching them those techniques. Surprisingly, the one who gave him a gift was none other than the usually passive Jasmine Flameworth. Meanwhile, the training with Adam, Helen, and his father continued with decent progress. To Arthur's surprise, Jasmine had already succeeded in learning a few techniques. It still amazes him how quickly she managed to grasp his instructions, especially when it came to learning Feint Step. After some fun near a picturesque waterfall, the group decided to press on with their journey. Eventually, they arrived at a desolate and barren landscape, a stark contrast to the lush greenery they had left behind. As the group shared some lighthearted banter, they joked about Arthur's father being a trouble magnet who always managed to drag everyone into some kind of mess. Meanwhile, Arthur tries to focus on reading a book but finds it nearly impossible to concentrate. The cause of his distress is Jasmine's stares, who just can't stop staring at him for quite a while now. Suddenly, their journey is interrupted by bandits. While everyone gets ready to face them, the looters outside launch a barrage of arrows. Thankfully, Angela Rose's wind magic stops most of them in their tracks, scattering the projectiles harmlessly. The adventurers quickly exude an intense aura as they grab their respective weapons, preparing for the fight. Helen immediately takes her stance, drawing and readying an arrow. But judging by the sheer number of bandits swarming over the hills, it's clear her single arrow won't be enough to deal with the danger. There are a shitload of bandits surrounding them, completely cornering the group from all directions. Finally, we get a glimpse of this disgusting guy, who seems to be the leader of the bandit gang. The bastard wastes no time in barking orders at his goons to leave the women and the kid alive. He does not want any damage inflicted on the two he mentioned. After all, damaged goods wouldn't sell for much. This is the pivotal moment when Arthur realizes that this world isn't so different from the one he left behind. Crime exists here too, and it's just as cruel. Either way, my guy is ready to face the challenge ahead. He grabs his dagger tightly, preparing himself for what's to come. But before he can act, his mother instinctively pulls him into a warm hug, whispering that there's no need to worry because she's here. The bandits release another volley of arrows, but Durden Walker quickly conjures a wall of stone using his earth magic and blocks most of the attack. However, the bandits begin to overwhelm them, charging from every direction. A few arrows manage to slip past the stone wall, heading straight for Arthur and his mother. Thankfully, Angela Rose saves the day by using her wind magic to deflect the incoming projectiles. The leader of the bandit gang finally makes his move and comes down the hill to confront the party. Helen Shard isn't about to let that happen without a fight. She fires her arrows, managing to take down two of the goons. But the leader deflects her shots with ease. Meanwhile, Reynolds is going all out, cutting down these bastards left and right. With a single dash, he takes out a whole bunch of them in one fell swoop. One sneaky bastard tries to ambush Reynolds from behind, but Helen spots it just in time and drills him with a perfectly aimed arrow. The battle rages on, and we catch a glimpse of Crench in action as well. He's not holding back either. When a fat fuck tries to sneak up on him, Crench dodges the attack right away and counters with a series of devastating stabs. We also notice how fierce Jasmine is with her dual daggers. She's brutalizing these bastards, slashing their necks or gouging their eyes out without hesitation. One creepy bastard in the background cracks a whip, aiming it directly at Jasmine. But instead of hitting her, the whip slices through one of his own men's legs. The blow is fast and devastating, and Jasmine barely avoids it. The bastard is undeterred and cracks his whip again. The speed at which he swings it is insane, but Jasmine matches the pace with her impressive acrobatics, dodging and weaving through his attacks. While she avoids some of the major blows, she still ends up with some nasty grazes. That just goes on to show that even she's not invincible. Meanwhile, Arthur watches the battle happen between Jasmine and the whip-wielding bastard. He takes note of how Jasmine is at a significant disadvantage against her opponent's range attacks, and he realizes he needs to figure out a way to help her. But as much as he wants to assist, he's not sure if he even stands a chance against an adult augmenter with his tiny body. Suddenly, someone crashes into their carriage, and unfortunately, it's Reynolds, and he's severely injured, clearly overpowered by his opponent. And that opponent is none other than the boss of the bandits. Arthur quickly tells his mother to heal Reynolds, but Alice is too devastated by everything happening around her. She's crying uncontrollably instead of using her magic. Reynolds flashes a reassuring smile at her and says his injuries aren't life-threatening, so she doesn't need to worry. The proud father then addresses his son, claiming that he can fend off the leader, but not while worrying about protecting his family. He urges Alice and Arthur to head back down the trail they came from and not stop running, but Arthur refuses. He declares he can fight too. Reynolds gives him a proud pat on the head for his bravery. He acknowledges Arthur's bravery, but reminds him that his real duty is to protect his mother and the baby she's carrying. Before Reynolds can say more, Arthur swears on his life that he'll protect his mother. His father nods and urges him to hurry, pointing out the enemy have got 4 mages backing them up. The bandit leader catches on to their plan and orders his men to capture the healer. Without hesitation, Arthur grabs his mother's hand and starts running, determined to get her. Suddenly, one bastard lunges at the duo, but his path is quickly blocked by Crench, who jumps in to hold down the enemy, giving the mother and son enough time to escape. Another bastard tries to sneakily hit the duo with an arrow. However, it doesn't take Arthur long to sense the arrow coming. He quickly tries to knock it down with his wooden sword. The arrow, though, is so powerful that it even cracks the sword in 2 pieces. The archer is in awe, stunned to see how a kid blocked his mighty arrow. But while he's distracted, his head is drilled by an arrow unleashed by Heron, who quickly tells Arthur to run. As the little one runs with his mother, he notices something peculiar. As far as he remembers, there were supposed to be 4 mages, but he can't seem to spot the 4th one. He even tries counting them, One is engaged with Crench, another with Durden Walker, and the third with Jasmine. That's when Arthur notices the fourth guy, standing atop the hill, conjuring up a giant ball of mana. The bastard quickly throws that ball of energy at the mother and son. Arthur isn't sure what to do in this critical moment. Even if he uses mana to block it, his mother won't be fast enough to avoid it. In a split-second decision, he slams his little feet on the ground, pushes his mother out of harm's way, and through that hazy ball of mana, he throws his dagger with godly speed. The dagger strikes the bastard's leg immediately. The mana ball, however, brutally wounds Arthur, sending him flying toward the cliff's edge. As he begins to fall, he drags the mage down with him. The dagger Arthur threw was attached to a mana string, which is helping him to pull the mage along. But just before they completely fall, the mage clings to the cliff's edge. Unfortunately, the part of the cliff he holds onto crumbles under the weight, and both of them begin to plummet into the abyss. Durden Walker notices the little one falling to his death, so he conjures a massive hand made of earth to save him. But it seems Durden is already too late. Tears well up in Arthur's eyes as he continues to descend. What breaks his heart isn't just the fall, it's the thought that his dream of becoming a big brother is slipping away from his grasp. The scene transitions to the chamber of a man known as Marlorn. King Grey, who is our boy Arthur, arrives in the chamber to meet this old man. Marlorn expresses how grateful he is for being part of the council, but also admits that despite this rewarding position, he sometimes feels envious of the fame and glory kings receive after their victories. Eventually, Marlorn questions the purpose of King Grey's unexpected visit, wondering what brought him here to meet an old man like himself. That's when Grey silently pulls out a war medal he earned after his latest victory, and after placing it on the table he begins to leave, declaring that he is retiring. In this world, plagued by problems like declining birth rates and limited resources, wars had been replaced by duels, and armies by kings. Grey was one of those kings, a key figure who fought to protect his territory as its representative. But Grey's decision to step down wasn't born out of exhaustion or a lack of skill. He hadn't dedicated his life to becoming the strongest or basking in endless glory. What truly broke him was the emptiness, the absence of people he could cherish. An orphan with everyone he once loved is gone. Now, reborn as Arthur in a new life, he carries a profound yearning. He would give up everything he has in this life for just one chance to return to Ashbur and see them all again. A while later, Arthur begins to open his eyes. He has no clue where he is or why he's even alive, for that matter. Nearby, he notices the corpse of the mage lying lifeless. The sight of that messed up, twisted corpse instantly makes him gag. Still, as he lays beneath the vast sky completely worn out, a leaf drifts down and lands on his face, jolting him awake. He spots a water pouch and a bag of food lying on the ground nearby. With the last bit of strength he has, Arthur crawls toward them. He grabs the food and devours whatever it is, making sure to gulp down enough water too. After the meal, he collapses back onto the ground, utterly exhausted. A while later, he opens his eyes again and tries to get back up, but his legs give out and he falls right back down. Despite that, he musters every ounce of strength left in him, finally pushing himself to stand. The first thing he does is pull the dagger out of the mage's dead body. When he looks up, he finally notices just how tall the cliff is from where he fell. It's unfathomable that he survived such a drop, but he doesn't have time to dwell on it, so he begins to walk his lonely path. Suddenly he hears a voice calling out to him. The first thought that pops into his mind is that the dead mage might be trying to tell him something. The voice echoes again, this time asking about the condition of his body. The poor kid musters up his courage and nervously tries to poke the mage's dead body to check if it's alive. But the voice quickly assures him that this corpse won't be reanimating, so there's nothing to worry about. Arthur heaves a sigh of relief at this unexpected reassurance. However, his guard immediately goes back up, and he questions the mysterious voice, asking if it was the one who saved him from that brutal fall. The voice doesn't hesitate to confirm that it indeed saved him. But when Arthur presses for its identity, the voice cryptically claims that he'll learn about it soon enough. Arthur doesn't like the way this mysterious voice is talking and makes it very clear he isn't buying a single word of it. The voice, however, calmly reminds him that it's the only one capable of getting him home from this place. The mention of home quickly jogs Arthur's memory, and he remembers the parents he left behind, and of course the sibling growing in his mother's belly. He has no idea if they made it to Zyra safely, or if they're even all right. Since there are so many questions he wants answers of, he gets humbled real quick, and politely addresses this mysterious being as Mr. Voice, and asks if he could trouble it for directions to get out of this place. The voice chuckles, amused at how this once arrogant kid has quickly become humble. It admits to liking Arthur for his quick wit, but can't help pointing out its annoyance at being called Mr., when in fact, it's a lady. Still, since Arthur's words were polite enough, the voice decides to guide him. Soon after, Arthur's mind is overwhelmed by this sudden shock, and he begins to see everything around him, even places far off in the distance. With this epiphany, Arthur starts making his way out of the woods. His body is recovering gradually, leaving him with only a few faint aches and pains by the afternoon. But he is still trying to figure out what magic she used to save him. How did she know he was falling? And why did she only save him? The more Arthur tries to come up with plausible explanations, the more questions he seems to end up with. Suddenly, Arthur's ears pick up the sweet sound of water flowing. He climbs up a giant rock blocking his path and literally dives into the river without a second thought. As he enjoys the refreshing moment, the mysterious lady calls out to him for how carefree he seems. She also questions the size of his manhood, expressing disappointment over such a small gun. Arthur feels humiliated and quickly pulls his clothes back on. Before continuing his journey, he makes sure to fill his water pouch and eat enough to keep his strength up. Since he fell off the mountain towards the east, he must be near the elves' domain, but he doesn't see any of the fog that Forest Elshire is known for. His fears about traveling through the beast glades are quelled by the fact that only small animals seem to be present. Although he's surprised he hasn't seen any mana beasts, given how rich the area is in mana. He would love to stay and absorb some mana, but he knows he can't linger. He has no time to waste. Especially it's more important to get back to his parents. With his mother pregnant, the stress of his potential death could endanger the baby inside her, and if they are still alive, he needs to be there for them. After walking long enough, Arthur finally arrives at the place where the mysterious lady resides. For a moment, he mistakes her for a cluster of rocks and feels relieved to have finally found her. But the lady quickly reminds him that she isn't some sentient pile of rocks, and tells him that if he wants to meet her, he'll have to head into the crevice. Without hesitation, Arthur begins making his way inside this tunnel which has this arcane faint glow emanating. He swallows his fear and descends further into the passage. As he walks, he suddenly stumbles and falls into an abyss glowing with arcane blue energy, eventually landing hard on solid ground. The crash is brutal, and his jaw aches like hell. Still, Arthur forces himself to get up, but no sooner does he stand than he collapses again. Before him stands a terrifying monster, so imposing it makes him trip over himself in fear. But, as it turns out, this monster is none other than the mysterious lady who had been talking to him all along. As she slowly walks toward him, Arthur panics beyond belief, his jaw hanging wide open in sheer terror. The girl suggests he shut his mouth unless he wants bugs to crawl into it. She then extends her massive hand toward him, which freaks him out a little. Calmly, she explains that it will take her some time to open a dimensional rift strong enough to transport him home. Until then, she suggests he enjoy the nourishment provided by the mysterious plants around them. Arthur bows his head and expresses his gratitude before walking toward the strange glowing fruits nearby. They're so shiny that he can literally see his sad reflection in their surface. He feels sorrow as the fruits remind him of the times he spent eating with his family. As he drifts into these thoughts, the lady monster suddenly startles him from behind. The sudden scare causes Arthur to unintentionally crush the delicate fruit in his hand, splattering its juice all over his face. Later, the both of them settle down to chow down the fruits, and while eating, Arthur finally decides it's time for this creature to introduce herself. The monster promptly reveals her name as Sylvia. With names exchanged, Arthur's initial fear of Sylvia's appearance slowly fades, and he begins asking all the questions that had been on his mind since waking up from the fall. Where was this place? Why was she here all alone? Where did she come from? How did she get that wound? And most importantly, why did she save him? Sylvia starts by answering his first question, explaining that this place is a narrow zone resting between the Beast Glades and the Forest of Elshire. No one knows about this area because she has been warding off anyone who comes near. Besides, not that many ever come here in the first place. So Arthur is basically the first person to enter her domain. Feeling more at ease with her now, Arthur gives her permission to call him Art, just as his family does. Sylvia acknowledges this with a nod and moves on to his second question. She explains that she is here alone because she has no one left to be with. She has many enemies who desperately want something she possesses. Her last battle with those foes before she managed to escape left her with the wound on her chest. As for why she decided to save Arthur, she admits she was moved by his courage and the sacrifice he made. Or perhaps it was simply that she had grown lonely and wanted someone to talk to. Whatever the case, she herself isn't entirely sure why she saved him in the first place. She then apologizes, explaining that she has to excuse herself for the night because her wound is festering, and she needs to be in good condition to work on the dimensional rift tomorrow. Arthur thanks her politely and wishes her a good night. As the imposing figure in dark armor walks away, he can't help but think about how lonely she appears. Before leaving, Sylvia shares one final piece of information with him. While her sight cannot reach the exact location of his family and friends, she assures him that they are all safe. This news leaves Arthur momentarily speechless, but then he feels overwhelmed with emotion, knowing they are safe. Tears of happiness flow as he cracks a smile and thanks her for giving him the good news he had been desperately craving. As time passed, Sylvia and Arthur spent hours talking about all sorts of things whenever she wasn't preparing the portal. Those hours bled into days, and the days into weeks, as they spent nearly every moment in each other's company. While Sylvia never spoke much about her own life, Arthur slowly began to understand what kind of person this mysterious being truly was. After living with this armor-clad mysterious lady, Arthur had come to understand that Sylvia was the living embodiment of the phrase, "Don't judge a book by its cover." Contrary to her trauma-inducing appearance, she was kind, gentle, patient, and warm. The way she cared for him reminded him of his mother, gentle and kind, but little strict when she needed to be, especially when he was wrong. Speaking of being strict, Arthur recalls something unpleasant. There was a time he had expressed his animosity toward the bandits who attacked him and his family. The image of the leader of that despicable gang is burned into his mind, and he knows his thoughts won't be at peace unless he hunts that bastard down. That's when Sylvia suddenly pokes him on the forehead, sending him flying several feet away. While she admits that he is not wrong, and that those bandits deserved death, which was precisely why she didn't save the mage who had fallen alongside him. However, she makes it clear that letting his heart become clouded with hatred and vengeance would only cause harm to himself in the long run. Instead, she tells him to continue living proudly, keeping his gaze forward, free from the weight of vengeance. He will come across misfortunes again, but he shouldn't let grief and rage corrode his mind. Instead, he should learn from them, face the future with a smile, and only then will he truly be victorious. Arthur wasn't expecting a lecture on morals and life from someone who seemed like the epitome of evil, yet her words struck him deeply. Lost in thought, he barely notices when she pulls him out of his contemplation, reminding him to finish the fruit she's given him. As he eats, he notices her wound looks worse. She quickly reassures him that there's nothing to worry about. It's normal for her wound to fester from time to time. Still, she has something else on her mind. According to her understanding, humans usually awaken their mana cores around the age of 12 or 13. So, how has he already formed his core and learned to use mana more efficiently than many fully trained mages? To her query, Arthur proudly explains that he is simply a born genius. If that's the case, she says, she has something to teach him. It's a technique, a way to meditate and absorb mana while moving, and maybe even while fighting if he's skilled enough. When she demonstrates the technique, Arthur is awestruck to see this, and his curiosity shoots through the roof. Sylvia then explains that humans often have a very linear mindset when it comes to mana. To master this technique, he has to start small, with simple, mindless movements, and gradually work his way up from there. But these abstract words aren't much help to Arthur, so Sylvia tries to explain that mana beasts learn to do this naturally. However, since humans usually awaken much later, their bodies aren't capable of this kind of multitasking. Considering that this fact doesn't apply to Arthur, if he practices hard enough, he should be able to succeed. These few words of encouragement are enough to fire Arthur up, and he promises to do his best if that's the case. While Sylvia is busy forming a rift, Arthur focuses on practicing diligently. However, his wrong movement causes him to trip. Practicing this skill to its fullest essentially means being able to fight proficiently while maintaining a steady inward flow of mana. But his confidence doesn't waver, and he continues his practice. He keeps swinging and practicing, trying to absorb the mana around him. Eventually, he gets the hang of it and finally masters the art of mana absorption. He happily shares his little achievement with Sylvia, but it looks like she's already exhausted herself and isn't in any condition to respond. Seeing her lifeless there causes Arthur to panic. It looks like her injury has gotten the best of her, and the blood leaking through her massive body is filling the area. He quickly grabs her massive hand, and with every ounce of strength his small body can muster, he successfully turns her massive form over, only to see that her wound is worsening. But when he looks ahead, the rift she has been creating is finally complete and ready for travel. Now that he thinks about it, he realizes how all this time, as she worked on creating the portal, her injuries have been getting worse. The realization devastates him. The thought that she has suffered because she was trying to create this portal for him, and he hadn't even noticed until now, crushes him. That's when Sylvia speaks with her faint voice and assures him that everything is all right. Arthur can do nothing but cling to her, tears streaming down his face as he cries his heart out. He doesn't know how it can possibly be all right when she's about to leave him like this. The thought that she has essentially given up her life for him makes his heart ache even more. In that moment, Arthur cries. He cries longer than he would ever care to admit, and for the first time, he cries like the child he appears to be on the outside. Sylvia reminds him gently that their time together is short, and she would hate for it to be wasted on him blaming himself. But Arthur doesn't know how he can possibly not blame himself. She's sacrificing herself so he can reunite with his family. Sylvia, however, is grateful. Because of Arthur, She will finally be able to leave this forsaken cave a little sooner, and for that reason alone, she has no regrets. Soon enough, her body begins to disintegrate, turning into ash. As the black armor she wears crumbles away, a pair of radiant white wings appear in its place. Before him stands Sylvia in a new form, one where she looks more like herself than she ever did before. Arthur definitely wasn't expecting Sylvia to turn out to be a dragon. She admits it, though. She is a dragon. Or at least that's what humans would call a being like her. However, she reminds him that they don't need to waste time with small talk. She has to use her original form to finish the portal, and now that her veil is gone, her enemies will soon be coming for her. Before she parts ways with him, she tells him there are a few things she must say. She bestows upon him a rainbow-like egg, along with a handful of her feathers. She tells him to warm the egg with her feathers to conceal its aura. Before Arthur can even process what in the world is going on, she suddenly bumps into him. Right at that moment, some sort of reaction causes his clothes to tear, and patterns begin to appear across his skin. Sylvia reassures him that he'll understand everything in time. Now that she has done what she needed to do, she decides to open the portal. She doesn't have the time to make it lead directly to his home, but it should get him close to humans. She urges him to hurry and jump into the portal. Just as he's about to leap, rocks begin to fall from the ceiling. Sylvia quickly spreads her massive wings and saves him from being crushed. The one responsible for the destruction is a creepy sucker who oddly resembles Sylvia. He addresses Sylvia formally, requesting that she cease her stubbornness and hand it over. If she submits, he might even heal her wounds. Even Arthur can tell that this new figure looks quite similar to the form Sylvia had taken earlier. Sylvia then uses an ability that freezes time around her. The only ones who can move or speak are herself and Arthur. It looks like she has something important to reveal. She admits that she intentionally prolonged the transportation spell so she could spend more time with him. She understands it was selfish of her, but she has one more selfish request she wants him to fulfill. She asks him to call her Grandma just this once. Arthur, completely baffled by what she's talking about, looks at her in disbelief. But with time frozen and their moment suspended, he tells her to just leave this place with him instead. Sylvia's tears stream down her face as she tells Arthur that she can't leave with him. Before he can protest further, she forcefully throws him into the portal with a final bittersweet farewell. As he tumbles through the rift, Arthur calls out to her one last time, fulfilling her request by addressing her as Grandma. His words bring a gentle smile to Sylvia's face. She thanks him softly, and with those parting words, their story together comes to an end. But Arthur's story continues. He lands in a dense forest, surrounded by towering trees. The only thought in his mind is of her. His chest aches, not only with sadness but also with frustration and anger. He knows he will never see her again, and the weight of that realization is unbearable. All he can do is scream. It's no surprise that he's devastated by her loss. For 4 months, Sylvia had been a constant presence in his life, filling his head with memories that now refused to fade. For a time that seemed both fleeting and eternal, she treated him as though he were her own blood. She had given him what he lacked since coming to this world: care, guidance, and love. But it seems this isn't truly the end. As he lies there, he begins to hear her voice. But as it turns out, it's just a recorded message. Sylvia had burned it into his mind before parting ways, leaving him with one last piece of her. The recorded message from Sylvia begins. She tells Arthur that he is nowhere near ready to know the full truth. His body is still that of a boy barely past the age of 4, though his mana core has already progressed to the dark red stage. She explains that she has infused him with a parting gift, a unique will. His future as a mage will depend on how well he learns to wield this gift. But Arthur doesn't feel particularly grateful for this so-called gift. Bitterness churns within him, a mix of sorrow, anger, and guilt clouding his thoughts. Almost as if she can sense his emotions, Sylvia knows exactly how he feels right now. But he must remember that he still has a family waiting for him and a purpose to fulfill in this life. Her only wish is for him to embrace the joys and innocence of childhood, and one day, grow into a man his parents and she can be proud of. Sylvia's message concludes with a promise. When his mana core surpasses the white stage, he will hear from her again. At that time, she will explain everything to him. Until then, she bids King Grey farewell. The mention of his previous life title grabs Arthur's attention. He stands frozen in place, with his mind completely clouded with confusion. The biggest question that haunts him is how long she's known his true identity, and how she even knew him in the first place. For now, he brushes off all the thoughts regarding her and focuses on his current predicament. If he spends this life only training for the sake of revenge, it will hardly be different from his last. So from now on, he has no choice but to move forward. But first, he wonders, where the hell is he? He activates the mana absorption technique and dashes through the forest with godly speed. After running for a while, Arthur realizes that despite using mana, his vision is still somewhat restricted. But one thing becomes clear. He is deep within the Elshire forest. Even though he is still barely able to use the mana rotation Sylvia taught him, he can now sustain magic for much longer. However, after roaming around for what feels like ages, he still hasn't found a way out. Sylvia had promised him he would arrive near other humans, but so far, he hasn't seen a single trace of them. After hopping through trees for what feels like forever, Arthur starts to feel like a monkey who's mastered tree travel. Suddenly, he senses the presence of a human. Quickly, he hops from tree to tree and spots a carriage below. He uses his acrobatic skills to descend a little, and from a safe distance, he tries to eavesdrop on what these people are up to. These filthy bastards don't seem to be good people. They've just captured a woman, and it turns out she's an elf. Since she's young and untouched, they're already fantasizing about making a fortune offer. But the amount of resentment and anger etched across Arthur's face makes it clear that these bastards aren't going to leave this place alive, let alone make a quick buck off the elf. Arthur had no idea how these pigs managed to get their hands on forest hounds, but he knew that getting one of them would be his best bet to get out of this forest. And as for the slave traders, he is planning to use them as a punching bag to blow off some steam. As eager as Arthur is to get back home, he knows he still needs a solid plan to get there. Dealing with those slave traders first is the best course of action, but he doesn't want to strike blindly. Attacking all 4 of them head-on would be suicide, so he quietly follows them instead. He waits patiently, looking for the perfect opportunity, gathering his strength to strike when their guards are down. As night falls, it's finally time for him to make his move. Arthur executes his plan by throwing a nut into a nearby tree, which immediately sets the hounds on high alert. One of the men tells his companion to shut the dogs up before they wake up and attract all the dangers lurking in the forest. While one man is distracted with the hounds, Arthur seizes the opportunity. He makes his move by appearing right in front of the bastard, and with a quick slash from his mana-infused hand, he slices through the man's throat in one clean strike. After taking that bastard down, Arthur makes sure to loot his corpse, grabbing a decent-looking dagger from the man's belongings. Meanwhile, the other fat guy, who had sent his friend to silence the hounds, begins wondering why it's taking so long, especially since the dogs have gone quiet. When he goes to check, Arthur ambushes him as well, delivering a precise strike that slits his throat just like the first. With 2 down, there are still 2 left, but Arthur's body is already starting to wear out from the effort. Suddenly, the elf girl inside the carriage starts making a commotion, which is the last thing Arthur wanted to happen. The other 2 goons step out of their comfort zones and start looking around for their missing companions. Arthur stays hidden behind the carriage, but one of them senses something and attacks. Arthur barely manages to block the strike and counters by cutting the man's legs clean off. The piercing scream echoes through the night, catching the attention of the other bandit, who had been searching in the opposite direction. He rushes back to the scene, finding his friend writhing on the ground, mortally wounded. The injured baldy bastard warns his friend to be careful because the brat they're dealing with is a mage. The mention of a mage piques the curiosity of the long-haired bandit. He eagerly tosses the sword aside and opts to use his bare hands, clearly not wanting to harm this golden hen he is about to capture. After all, this brat might fetch an even higher price than the elf girl if they are to sell him in good condition. With that in mind, he charges forward. Arthur leaps away just in time and counters by throwing a rock straight at the bastard's face. The rock lands with enough force to leave the man bleeding from his mouth. Arthur tries to take advantage of his dazed situation by throwing a mana-induced dagger at him, but the bandit snatches it mid-air. This strike only serves to intrigue this bastard even more, to think that this kid indeed has some nasty tricks up his sleeve. The bandit launches a powerful kick, slamming into Arthur with enough force to rattle his small frame and send him crashing to the ground. For a moment, Arthur is completely out of commission, winded and vulnerable. The bandit doesn't hesitate before grabbing the little one from the ground, locking him in his grip. But Arthur isn't one to go down quietly. He quickly grabs this bastard's wrist and begins condensing mana into his hand. At one particular moment, the technique causes an explosion, big enough to leave the bandit's hand scorched and utterly useless. The bandit screams in pain because of his fried hand. This is a clear chance for our boy to strike, and he does not hesitate to redeem it. He throws his knife and slits the man's throat, ending him on the spot. Now only the bald man remains, who is already writhing on the ground, begging for mercy as his severed legs leave him completely immobilized. But Arthur abandoned the concept of mercy a long time ago for scumbags like these. So it goes without saying that he finishes the job, ensuring none of them leave the forest alive. With these scumbags taken care of, he turns to the timid elf girl whose first instinct upon seeing our boy is to cower in fear. He gently tries to sway all of her fear with some sweet talk and comforting words, and once she calms down, he pulls the cloth tied over her mouth. Now that he has saved her, he decides to walk his own path, but the thought of being left alone terrifies the girl, so she quickly clings to him with her cute, pleading eyes. Arthur tries to reason with her that since he has taken care of those bad guys, They won't be able to chase her anymore. Besides, elves are generally safe in this forest anyway. But the girl quickly shakes her head and reminds him that beasts are only scared of adults, and her parents said that kids will get eaten by hounds or golem trees. The thought of being a babysitter does not sit well with Arthur, but since he has no choice, he just reluctantly asks her how far her home is, to which the girl nonchalantly responds that she does not know. He lets out a sigh and begins to walk away, assuring her that he is simply going to gather some supplies for them. Although he salvaged what he could for the journey ahead, neither of them knew how long it would take, and he also had to think about the journey back. He feels quite sad to see that they can't take this carriage in use as it would have been way faster, but if he did, they would just stick out like a sore thumb. He is looking forward to finding the elves as they might have something that can take him back to the human kingdom. During his supply hunting, he found some clothes in the carriage and presents them to the little elf, and tells her to wear this cloak as it will probably get cold. The little lady is glad for his kind gesture, and he gives her a pat on the head in response. With that, they are ready to make their way to their homes. As they walked in the vague direction she pointed to, Arthur got to know more about the elf child. Her name is Tessia Aerolith, and she got separated from her family and left out in the forest. She questions him if he is from the human kingdom. Whenever she remembers the human kingdom, all she thinks of are the rumors that say all male humans are perverts and have more than one wife. In their journey, they spend their time like this, with back and forth banter and teasing. Night settled, and they set up their camp in the thick of the woods. Arthur decided to keep watch outside and suggested she have some sleep in the meantime. Once Tessia Aerolith got inside the camp to have some well-deserved rest, Arthur sat alone under the expanse of brightly lit stars. As he reflects on his situation, we learn that his initial plan to utilize his time to figure out what this will Sylvia left for him was all about. But it looks like he will have to wait to unravel this secret until he escorts the elf girl to her home. The girl gets out and suggests he have some rest as well. Although her grandmother has prohibited her from sharing her bed with boys, she says she will make an exception once. But Arthur tells her that he is not sleepy. Before retreating back into the camp, the girl reminds him that beasts are more likely to appear if they notice him. Therefore, she wants him to get inside even if he is on guard duty, as it's safer for both of them. Eventually, Arthur gives in to her wishes, and they both get into the same bedding. The next day arrives, and after their well-deserved naps, they continued their journey with unfamiliar surroundings and time quickly passing as the only indicators of their progress. Arthur admits that worries of family and impatience to get back home did not leave him in the best of moods. But what made the journey almost unbearable were the agonizing pains coming from his monocore that struck unpredictably from time to time, and his pain has become an everyday occurrence. Every day he wakes up, he is just randomly hit by it. On one particular day during their journey, we see that they are getting followed by these wild wolves, but my guy doesn't even look back when he throws that knife, which lodges itself into the tree next to the wolf's head. And soon, all of these poor bastards get the jump scare of their life. While Tessia Aerolith points her finger in the direction ahead of her, Arthur is hit by this unbearable pain in his chest once again. He quickly hides behind a tree so Tessia doesn't have to see the miserable state he's in because he's afraid she would only worry. Another night comes, and they set their camp in the thick of the woods, and just like that, another day arrives. Days passed like this, and Tessia appeared to recognize more and more of their indistinguishable surroundings, which was a positive sign. However, their pace had slowed as Tessia's body couldn't keep up with the toll of constant travel. So, to ease some burden off her tiny shoulders, Arthur takes her luggage himself, though Arthur wasn't having it easy either. Despite strengthening his body with mana, the pain continued to grow, and it became harder to hide it from the worried elf. Another night comes and blends back into a day. One day, as they continue their journey, Tessia makes an odd request. Since they've gotten pretty close with each other, she wonders if, by any chance, she can call him Art, like how his family does. Well, our boy gives her the green light right away. Tessia wasn't expecting him to agree to this so easily. So for that reason, Arthur decides to act dramatic on purpose. In the creepiest way possible, he says he would be most honored if Tessia Aerolith would refer to this humble countryside boy as Arthur. The girl pinches his cheeks for teasing her like this, and as their banter continues, Tessia suddenly notices something. She happily rushes in that direction, while our boy isn't exactly thrilled. As far as he can see, it's just moss, leaves, fog, trees, and lots of trees. Anyhow, their journey continues, and I'm going to be honest, this is one of the longest journeys I've faced in the manhwa. Though this journey serves its purpose in character development, and because of it, our boy seems to have gotten closer to the little lady. Despite the mental age gap, they've grown a lot closer. Another day arrives, bringing another round of exploring the unknown woods. It looks like this long journey has finally borne fruit as they seem to have made their way. After feeling all the trees around her, Tessia finally finds the one she had been searching for. She does some magic mojo and opens a green gate in the wooden tree, inviting him to follow her inside. As soon as Arthur steps in, he falls through to the other side of the gate. When Arthur gets up and helps himself look ahead, he sees a magnificent sight. There's an entire civilization of elves, and the only word that pops into his mind after witnessing the grandeur of this place is pristine. But even that word feels like it doesn't do the place justice. As soon as the eyes of the local elves lock onto our boy, some soldiers quickly appear right before them. The soldiers aren't here to apprehend him, though. Instead, they're here to escort the royal princess with full protocol. The sight shocks Arthur to the point where he has no clue how in the hell he's supposed to react. His mind is clouded with all sorts of questions, but Tessia just nods her head slightly to affirm that what he's seeing is indeed real. One of the knights reports that they arrived as soon as they noticed the oral teleportation gate had been used. He also mentions that the king and queen have returned as well. Promptly, the scene pans to the panicking parents rushing toward their girl, Tessia. The lady is Mariel Aerolith, Queen of Elenoir, and the man behind her is, of course, her husband, Alduin Aerolith, King of Elenoir. Another big shot enters the scene, Virion Aerolith. A name noted in every history book, he's the former king of Elenoir, known for leading the last war against the humans of the Sapin kingdom. With all of her family members gathered, Arthur gently pushes Tessia forward toward her worried parents, and they exchange warm hugs with her. Seeing how warm and full of love the scene is, Arthur remembers his own parents and wonders if his mother and father will react the same way when they see him again. King Alduin turns to Arthur and expresses his heartfelt gratitude, not just as the king of Elenoir, but as Tessia's father. As a small gesture of thanks for helping Tessia arrive home safely, he invites Arthur to accompany them to their home. Arthur is free to rest for a few days, and in the meantime, the king is eagerly looking forward to hearing the tale of their journey. Arthur can sense how firm and gentle the man's tone is, but his eyes clearly betray that feeling. From the look in his eyes, it's clear that what he requested isn't an offer, it's an order. Arthur reciprocates the gesture by expressing his gratitude for the offer, but he's suddenly yanked away when Tessia grabs him by the hand and starts dragging him along. Even the onlookers are startled to see this. The girl, on the other hand, is just dying to show him everything this place has to offer. Well, our boy's first impression is one of absolute awe. Although he had somewhat expected an impressive castle after learning that Tessia was a princess, the magnificent place before him is just more than a castle or mansion to live in. At one point, Arthur even starts to wonder if he's accidentally transmigrated into some corny fantasy novel. The queen quickly introduces their little guest to the maids and orders them to make sure Arthur has the best time possible while he's there. Arthur is glad to receive all this pleasant treatment, but he feels the need to explain what happened first. It looks like Tessia's parents are more than willing to hear all the juicy details. So, all the core members of the family, including some senior knights, gather to hear Arthur out. First, our boy gives an introduction, presenting himself as Arthur Lewin from a humble town in the kingdom of Sapin, and he's quite honored to be in the presence of the royal family. It's a little over the top for an introduction, but Arthur knows the discussion isn't going to progress if they treat him like a child. Even the king can't help but point out how, despite Arthur claiming to come from humble origins, he seems rather mature and well-educated. This only piques their interest in what he has to say. And so, our boy recounts his journey, starting with a vague explanation that he got separated from his family after running into bandits. It's not exactly a lie, but more of a half-truth. Inevitably, as the story progresses to the part where he ran into their daughter, the atmosphere shifts. The king grows visibly angry upon hearing it was slave traders, or rather, humans who captured Tessia. It's clear that the king doesn't have a favorable impression of humans to begin with, and this revelation only fuels his disdain. Our boy also does not like the fact that this elf king is stereotyping the entire human race behind few slave traders. So with all due respect, my guy corrects this man that slave trading is a profession, not a race. This remark only earns our boy a lot of shining blades pointed at him, but Virion Aerolith quickly stops the knights from stepping forward. Virion, intrigued by the story so far, expresses curiosity about how Arthur managed to free his granddaughter from the bandits. Perhaps he negotiated or begged them for mercy. But our boy denies doing anything like that and honestly explains that he's also a mage despite the fact that he is a child. So basically, he eliminated the slave traders and rescued their granddaughter. One impatient knight, out of anger, quickly draws his sword from its scabbard. As far as he's concerned, Arthur is being absurd with the lies he's spouting in front of everyone. But this impulsive action only earns the knight a deadly glare from Virion Aerolith, a glare so intense it rattles the overeager knight on the spot. Finally, Arthur stands up from his seat and declares that he doesn't care whether anyone believes him or not. The fact remains that Tessia has been returned safely. The only wish he wants granted is to return to his family in Sapin. Hearing this, Tessia is shocked that Arthur is leaving so soon. The girl's parents are startled to see how much compassion she feels for him. Meanwhile, Arthur gently reminds her of the history humans and elves share, so he doesn't believe it's appropriate for a human to remain inside this kingdom for too long. Besides, his current priority is ensuring his family is safe and letting them know he's okay as well. The king decides to speak next. He briefly acknowledges the past between the two kingdoms and emphasizes that Arthur saved their daughter and went through the trouble of accompanying her all the way back to Elenoir. This, the king declares, entitles Arthur to a befitting reward. First, the king shares the unfortunate news. The teleportation gate linked to the Sapin kingdom is only accessible once every 7 years during the summit conference between the three races. This means it will be another 5 years before the gate opens again. However, the king is more than happy to send a group of guards to escort Arthur back home safely. He also expresses his wish for Arthur to stay a little longer, giving the elves a chance to serve and spoil him as a guest. The king admits that while some elves are tolerant of humans, too many still hold grudges from the war long ago. For now, Arthur is told to make himself at home, as they will have his escort prepared by tomorrow morning. Later, Arthur finds himself inside a lavish room that's been given to him. The first thing he does is take a well-deserved shower, but while he showers, the pain from his mana core suddenly flares up again, causing him to double over. After finishing, he rests on the couch, holding the egg Sylvia had entrusted to him. Suddenly, there's a knock on the door. When he opens it, he finds Tessia standing in front of him. Without any prior warnings, she headbutts him in the belly, almost making him gag. Apparently, she's upset about how coldly he spoke to her parents, and the fact that he's planning to leave so soon. Arthur tries to remind this gullible girl that he was only being respectful since they are the king and queen of the entire kingdom. In fact, he's the one who should be angry. She didn't tell him about their royal status beforehand. Tessia sticks to her guns and makes it clear that she doesn't want him to leave because he's the first friend she's ever made. Hearing this makes Arthur crack a smile. In a friendly gesture, he places his hand over her neck like they're lifelong buddies and tells her to stop being a crybaby and show him around the castle. And so, they explore the castle together. Tessia makes sure to take him to her favorite spot in the entire place. This particular spot looks absolutely breathtaking during spring when the flowers bloom. She also introduces him to a unique type of insect known as glow bees, which are specially cultivated there. As she's trying to show him the glow bees, Arthur suddenly notices something coming from behind. It's a dagger. Without wasting a single nanosecond, he grabs the little lady and pushes her aside. In the same instant, he catches the weapon and retaliates with the insane speed he has got. Well, the person behind this stunt is none other than Virian Erlith, her grandfather. Arthur is absolutely shocked, thinking her own grandfather just tried to take a hit on her. But the old man calmly assures him that the weapon he's holding is just a toy. Now that Arthur takes a closer look, he feels a bit embarrassed for being tricked. Virian, on the other hand, is impressed. Seeing how fast Arthur reacted, from catching this little to even using it against him instantly, is mind-boggling. The old man notes that Arthur's mana usage is mediocre at best, but he now has no doubts about how he could have taken down a group of slave traders. Arthur is unsure whether to feel insulted or complimented, so he just stays quiet. Tessia chimes in, scolding her grandfather and prohibits him from teasing Arthur. It seems like the old man didn't have any intention of teasing anyone. In fact, he approached Arthur because he finds him fascinating. It's been a long time since he's met someone as interesting as our boy. Virian tosses a wooden sword at Arthur, deciding to see what the boy is really made of. Arthur grabs it promptly and, without hesitation, swings it as fast as he can, directly slashing at the old man. But what he strikes turns out to be a mana illusion. Virian, however, is impressed by the guts of this little brat. Not backing down, Arthur charges again and strikes with his wooden sword. This time too, what he hits is only a decoy. This moment of vulnerability leaves Arthur wide open, and the old man takes the chance to swing back. Arthur dodges just in time, jumping out of his initial position to safeguard himself. Despite his agility, Arthur still ends up taking a nasty elbow smash. But that's not enough to faze him. Without holding back, Arthur charges right back, wooden sword in hand. His speed is remarkable, but it's clear he's barely holding his own against this old coot, who isn't even breaking a sweat. Eventually, Arthur finds himself wide open once more, and gets knocked back by the old man, tumbling away. Tessia quickly rushes to check on him. It looks like the old man has not gone off without taking damage either. Arthur has finally managed to graze this old man with his blade. Well, this old man deserves this hit, considering how full of himself he looked, as if there is no better fighter than him. While Virian is eager for another round, Tessia firmly puts her foot down. She refuses to let it happen, and playfully pinches her grandfather for thinking about bullying Arthur for more than he already has. The old man simply smiles back and admits that if he had gone easier on Arthur, he'd be the one at the mercy of someone decades his junior. Our boy, on the other hand, feels honored to see how highly Virian thinks of him, but Arthur's reaction seems to get to the old man, and he quickly shifts from smiling to serious. As far as he's concerned, if Arthur truly sees him as his esteemed and honorable senior, then he invites him to become his disciple. This unexpected offer leaves Arthur absolutely bewildered, and he questions whether the elder is actually serious. The old man, of course, confirms that he is. However, Arthur reminds him that he's just a human, and he's not even sure if it's allowed for humans to stay in this kingdom. But Virion promises that no one will dare kick him out while he's under his tutelage. He vows to teach Arthur something far more valuable than even the most capable mages in Sapin could offer. Still, despite the tempting offer, Arthur politely declines. He has no intention of wasting time here until he reunites with his parents. Hearing this, the old man makes another promise, to let Arthur communicate with his parents so they'll know he's alive and well. Before elaborating further, the old man orders the maids to take Tessia to bathe and get some rest. Once they're alone, the old man claims to know about Arthur's condition, like how he's been experiencing bouts of searing pain right where his mana core is located, and how those bouts are becoming more frequent. Naturally, Arthur is curious about how the old man knows so much, but Virion brushes off the question, saying it's pointless. Instead, Arthur should be asking what the real problem behind his illness is. Before elaborating anything, he asks Arthur if he knows anything about beast wills. Although this term is completely unfamiliar to Arthur, his mind immediately drifts back to the moment Sylvia struck his mana core. Before continuing the conversation, the old man assumes that Arthur has at least encountered a few mana beasts by now. He then explains that a beast powerful enough to be categorized as Class A or higher gains the ability to pass on their will, or inherent ability, to another, either to their offspring or to someone they choose to bond with. He promises not to pry into how Arthur stumbled upon such a powerful beast will, but warns him that, at this stage, the power within him is doing more harm than good. The fact that the old man knows all this makes Arthur assume that Virion also possesses a beast will too. Well, the old man doesn't shy away from admitting it. He claims he's professionally a beast tamer, a title he earned by fully conquering the monstrous beast will inside himself. He acknowledges why Arthur desperately wants to see his family and return home, but he warns that doing so right now comes with a grave risk. The power of the beast will inside Arthur is too potent for his immature body to handle. If it isn't controlled soon, the power he has obtained will destroy his body from the inside out. As Arthur lays down, his face is covered with glistening sweat. There's a heavy sensation pressing down on his body. As he drifts in and out of unconsciousness, he sees the monstrous personification of his worries and burdens. The expectations placed on him haunt him, even in his sleep. But the source of all this weight is not some ethereal creature. It is Tessia, perched right atop him, unknowingly pressing him further into the depths of his exhaustion. She's apparently here to wake him up because she can't wait to start this new, exciting day with him. But it seems Arthur still hasn't had enough sleep, so calls the shadow monster back to give him just a few more minutes. Later, while Arthur gets ready for the day, Tessia asks to confirm if what her grandpa said about him staying is actually true. Well, our boy isn't too sure about this. His plan to stay here depends entirely on the trip with Elder Virion. As Arthur walks toward the carriage he's supposed to ride with the Elder, the king and queen can be seen pleading with Elder Virion to reconsider, because it's inappropriate for a human to stay in their kingdom. It goes against the traditions the elves have upheld for decades. But the old coot makes it clear that Arthur has caught his attention, so he wants him to stay a little longer. Besides, their daughter seems to have taken a liking to him as well, which is just another reason to keep him around for a bit more time. Despite all the pleas from the king, Elder Virion sticks to his guns. He assures the royals that he'll keep Arthur under his direct guidance to ensure everyone in the kingdom knows he's being watched over. Seeing how Elder Virion is standing up for him makes Arthur crack a smile. Once they hop into the carriage, they begin their journey. After quite a while on the road, Arthur starts wondering how much longer this trip will take as he's eager to meet the old man's mysterious friend. Out of nowhere, Tessia leans over Arthur's shoulder and falls asleep. Looks like waking up so early out of excitement finally caught up to her. Since Tessia is the only princess of the kingdom, she grew up in a lonely environment. She's been hurt too many times by both adults and children pretending to be her friends. Over time, she became cold and distant, building a wall around herself to keep others out. But in the short time he's seen her with Arthur, she's shown more smiles and laughter than she has in the past few years. For that, the old man is genuinely glad and expresses his gratitude to our boy. After a short journey, the carriage comes to a halt, and they arrive at a lonely house in the middle of nowhere. By now, Arthur is genuinely curious to see who this mysterious friend is that the former king had to travel all the way to this rural area to meet. The old man, however, goes absolutely bonkers, kicking the door with all the force he can muster and yelling for the witch inside to come out. A woman eventually emerges, equally annoyed and angry at Virion's impudence. The old man takes his time introducing her to Arthur. She is Lilia Darkasan, an old friend and a very special deviant who, according to Virion, can help him. Despite his short height, Arthur's manners know no bounds. He promptly bows his head in respect to greet the lady. Lilia invites them inside while Arthur reflects on the fact that, as a deviant, her magic doesn't fall into the 4 basic elements, much like his mother's abilities. But he's still unsure how she's supposed to help him. Although Arthur doesn't want to seem like an impatient brat, he can't help but feel curious about how Lilia plans to assist him in reaching his parents. The lady finally explains that she is what they call a diviner. Magic of this nature varies from mage to mage, but she's quite capable. This means there's very little someone can hide from her if she chooses to pry. For instance, she already knows that Arthur is special. So special in fact that there are parts of his life even she can't see. However, her eyes have glimpsed pieces of both his past and future. She also knows he isn't here for her clairvoyant abilities, but because he wants to see his parents and let them know he's alive. She instructs him to lean forward and keep his eyes on the basin of water. As soon as Arthur complies, the lady begins her magic. Once he can see his parents in the water, he'll be able to speak to them. While Arthur tries to make the connection, the perspective shifts to his parents. There, his doting mother and father are having a meal, something Arthur used to enjoy a lot. Suddenly, they begin to hear Arthur's voice calling out to them. The sound catches them completely off guard, leaving them frozen. When Arthur says he's their son, that's enough to paralyze them entirely, their spoons slipping out of their hands as they let the shock sink in. As surprising as it is, Arthur assures them that he is indeed their son speaking directly into their heads. He doesn't have time to explain everything right now, but wanted to let them know he's safe and alive. He managed to survive the fall off the cliff, though barely. He also reveals that he's currently staying in the kingdom of Noir with the elves, but insists they must keep this a secret. Arthur tells them not to blame themselves for what happened back then. He's proud of what he did, and if he could go back in time, he wouldn't hesitate to make the same choices again. He explains a bit about his illness he has got, so he will be staying here longer to be treated before he can return home. He admits he's unsure if he'll get another chance to talk to them, as there's only one woman capable of helping him make this connection. Before ending the conversation, he asks his father to keep his mother and the baby safe. In the meantime, he'll continue his training and warns his dad not to be surprised if his proud son can beat him in a sparring match when they reunite. With that, this cerebral Skype session ends. Arthur's father breaks into absolute tears, and his wife follows suit. They can barely believe that Arthur is alive. The joy and excitement of hearing that their son is alive is so overwhelming that Arthur's parents embrace each other in absolute happiness. It's not just the parents shedding tears. Arthur himself is equally overwhelmed by the conversation he just had with his parents. However, he steels his balls up and tells the old man that he's finally ready for whatever lies ahead. After their brief visit to Lilia, the group finally returns to the castle, where the king and queen are already waiting for their arrival. As Elder Virion and Tessia enter the castle, Arthur is suddenly stopped by the king himself. It's not because the king resents him or wishes to bar his entry, but because he wants to reconcile. Even the queen wants to express her regret for their earlier behavior. Neither of them holds back in showing genuine contrition for how they treated him initially. Arthur, ever the forgiving soul, is more than happy to mend bridges. He promptly shakes hands with the king on friendly terms. However, Tessia is not sure if that is how apologies should work. As far as she's concerned, if the king and queen are truly sorry, they should at least let her take Arthur outside to explore the city. Something she's been eager to do. Well, neither the king nor the queen has a reason to stop them, so eventually, Arthur and Tessia prepare to head out and explore the city. Tessia eagerly shows Arthur everything unique to Noir. However, during their walk, Arthur accidentally stumbles into an elf. Or rather, the elf intentionally bumps into him, clearly looking for an opportunity to trash-talk the entire human race. After setting the scene, this opportunistic elf directly points a finger at Arthur, reminding him that he doesn't belong here, no matter the favor he's receiving from Elder Virion. While Arthur feels a bit pissed at this cocky bastard, Tessia steps in to confront the guy. The elf introduces himself as Faerith Ivsar and counters Tessia's questions with arrogance, asking how she can tolerate breathing the same air as a mere commoner like Arthur. Being the great knight he is, Faerith even offers to take the responsibility to escort her himself. But Arthur quickly turns the tide with some playful banter. His few well-aimed words manage to piss Faerith off to no end. The idea of someone mocking his knighthood is too much for this little punk to handle. In a fit of rage, Faerith throws down the gauntlet and challenges Arthur to a duel. Arthur, who already thought this guy was stupid, finds his expectations exceeded in the worst way possible. Tessia immediately steps forward, questioning the audacity of this so-called knight. How dare Faerith challenge the disciple of Elder Virion to a duel? Faerith makes it clear that he would never allow anyone to trample on his pride, as this is the way he was raised. Determined to defend his honor, he challenges Arthur to accept the duel, or retreat with his primate tail tucked between his legs. To add pressure, Ferrith reminds Arthur that, in Elven society, his decision will reflect directly on his mentor, Elder Virion. Arthur, on the other hand, is fascinated by the intense expressions on everyone's faces. He hadn't realized that dueling was taken so seriously here. Ferrith, eager to get things started, takes Arthur's silence as acceptance. To get the things rolling, he insists that Princess Tessia officiate the duel. Reluctantly, Tessia agrees, and as soon as she gives the signal, Ferrith charges forward, aiming to land the first blow. But my guy simply balls up his fist and delivers a single devastating punch. The impact is so brutal that Ferrith's spit flies out of his mouth, and he's sent sprawling a few feet away. Arthur is left standing there, genuinely unsure if this is all it takes to win a duel. Meanwhile, Tessia isn't surprised to see the outcome, especially since she had expected this much to happen. As Arthur tries to wrap his head around whether he's become genuinely strong or if this was just a fluke, Tessia grabs his hand and dashes off. As they continue their journey once again, Arthur can't help but grow fonder of the little princess. While the rest of the day wasn't quite as exciting as dealing with Ferrith, it was refreshing and gave Arthur a chance to get his mind off heavier matters. As Arthur and Tessia sit together, she asks him if he's feeling nervous about the tough training ahead. Well, it is clear that the weight of the upcoming day has already begun to press on Arthur's mind. He recalls Elder Virion's words of warning, crystal clear and unyielding. Virion had told him that the lessons would be far from easy. In fact, he made it clear that Arthur would need to brace himself for the grueling challenges ahead. The pain from his mana core's assimilation process would be excruciating, and if you want a little perspective how grueling it would be, it's the same as submerging one's body in boiling tar. Arthur would be stuck in this foreign land, away from the comfort of his family. Even the simplest aspects of daily life would feel arduous. But Virion had also promised that, if Arthur could endure the trials, the rewards awaiting him at the end would be extraordinary. In the present, Arthur breaks out of his thoughts and responds to Tessia with a determined smile. He tells her that he's excited, not nervous. He's come a long way to get to where he is now. Training, seeing his parents again, and growing stronger are all things he looks forward to. He can't wait to see what the future holds for him. And with that, the first season wraps up, leaving Arthur ready to face whatever challenges come his way. The years fly by in the blink of an eye, and the first thing we see is a more mature Tessia. She's here to wake our boy up, who has also grown a lot since the last time we saw him. It looks like their relationship has evolved a lot. And just as they're bickering, the old man cuts them off, telling them to get ready for their lessons ahead. Before we get into the action, here's a quick lore drop. There are 4 basic elements, and then there are higher forms. The higher elements, ice, gravity, lightning, and sound, can only be controlled by mages who have mastered their foundational elements. These people are known as deviants. Dwarves are limited to manipulating earth and fire, but they have a much higher affinity for these elements. Their special trait is their ability to mold and bend metal, and the most skilled among them can control fire and earth to the point where they can summon and manipulate magma. Elves can manipulate water, wind, and earth, but with much higher affinity than humans. In rare cases, elves can also produce a special type of deviant mage capable of controlling plants. However, elves cannot produce mages who can control the higher forms of water, wind, or earth. Humans, on the other hand, can manipulate any of the 4 basic elements, and are the only race capable of producing deviants in any of those elements, as well as anomalies that can't be categorized into the elements, like emitters or healers. There's a delicate power balance between the 3 races, taking into account their populations, overall affinity to elements, and the diversity of their mages. At least, this is all Arthur knows, and he asks his master if this level of explanation is plausible for the audience. Virion takes a moment to think before giving it a pass. It seems Tessia has something to say. While she understands that the assimilation process is meant to prepare Arthur's body for his beast will, she believes it would be even better for him to train his body physically, just as she does, using magic in the process. Arthur understands the reasoning behind her response. Over these 3 years, the differences in their races have really stood out to him. While humans are considered talented if they awaken in their late preteen years, it's not surprising for elves to awaken by the age of 10. For Tessia, it happened even earlier, at the tender age of 9, and since then, she's been training her magic under a tutor while also learning to fight from her grandfather. The old man playfully questions her if she's perhaps angry that she's the only one getting beaten up during her training, to which the poor girl quickly admits. As grueling as these exercises seem, Arthur knows Tessia is going to be a monster in the future. The old man takes a moment to elaborate further for Tessia. He explains that what Arthur has been doing over the past 3 years is essentially fusing his bones, muscles, and organs with his mana. While he hasn't been physically training like her, the old man assures her that once this process is complete, Arthur's body will be stronger and more resilient than even a veteran warrior. Now shifting back to Arthur, The old man notes that 3 years of mana fusion hasn't been enough to drain his energy entirely, so he decides to help him a little. After today, Arthur will become a true beast tamer, unlike those lucky adventurers who treat their beast wills as mere tools. Apparently, Virion plans to ignite Arthur's mana core by transferring a large amount of his own mana into him. He reassures his junior that it might feel a bit warm, but it shouldn't be too bad. As soon as the old man begins the process, Arthur quickly learns the hard way that it's far more than just warm, it's downright hellish. The searing pain courses through him, and the light emanating from his chest grows ever brighter, intensifying to an almost blinding level. Then, without warning, a powerful wave of energy hits everything in its range, throwing both the old man and Tessia across the hall. When the procedure finally concludes, Tessia and the old man rush to our boy's side, and thankfully, he seems to be okay. He's dazed but intact. After witnessing such a terrifying display of power, the old man's curiosity reaches its peak. He finally decides to confront Arthur about the origin of the beast will he inherited.